Episode 194, Ironman, Florida, with Lisa Hesse. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hey everybody, welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Lisa Hesse about her recent race at Ironman, Florida that took place on November 4th, 2018. This race was moved from Panama City to Haines City in the weeks leading up to the race. The temperature on race day was 64 and rose to 87. She has a lot of great information to share, and I look forward to diving into your race, Lisa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, what made you want to do this race?
Well, I have a friend who lives down in Florida who wanted to do Ironman Florida for her first full. And I had done a full previously and said I wasn't going to do another. But she managed to peer pressure me into it. So I went ahead and registered, and yeah. And
Wow.
that happened.
So, going into this race, what was your training like?
Training was pretty solid. I'm actually not quite sure on the number of hours per week. I'd say between 10 and 17 probably hours per week of training. Obviously more as got closer to the peak for training. And yeah, I was swimming 2 to 3 times a week, biking probably 3 times a week, running 3 to 4 times a week.
Okay. So, which of the 3 sports is your strongest, you think?
Swimming, by far.
Really?
Yeah, I swam in college.
Oh, okay. So, you have a little bit of an advantage here.
Yes.
Nice. So, with your training going into this race, how long out did you actually start your build-up for this? I know you're working with Chuck Sims, right?
Yes. It's kind of hard to say because I did 3 70.3s leading up to the race.
Really?
Yes.
What did
So
you do?
I did Chattanooga in May, and then I did Ironman 70.3 Dunleary in Ireland in August, and then I went off of the Ironman, out of the Ironman Colt and did Pilgrimman up in Massachusetts in September.
Wow. So, I was actually at Chattanooga. That was a hot day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that wasn't fun at all.
Wow. So you did May, then June, and then another one?
No, May, August, and September.
May, August, September. Okay. So going into those, which of those was your favorite race leading up to this?
Pilgrimman I performed the best.
Really?
I made some tweaks following Dunleary, especially with the bike and my bike cadence, and it really paid off on the run. It was the first 70.3 that I had done that I was able to consistently run for 9 miles off of the bike. Usually I can do about 2 miles, and then I, kind of board the struggle bus and start walking. And so that was the first one that I felt pretty strong.
Wow. So what did you do with your cadence, and what was it before and after?
Before it was probably, 90 to 100, so I had a pretty high cadence, and a friend recommended a different podcast, actually, I forget which one, where he talked about he had done some efficiency training, and his most efficient cadence numbers ended up being 60 to 80, and went through the science on that, and I realized that sounded actually pretty solid, and so I made a lot of conscious effort to get my cadence down between 70 and 80.
Okay, and you're a science-driven person, it seems like.
Yes.
Considering that where you work and all that fun stuff, because
Yes.
you have a full-time job.
Yes, I do.
So what do you do when you're not training or racing or traveling?
Sleeping.
Sleeping.
That's really about it. I work, I train, I travel, and don't really do much else.
Okay. So going into this race, what was your longest swim, bike, and run workouts?
guess my longest swim, I mean, I do over 4,000 yards at master's practice a couple times a week. So, I really hadn't done any specific long swims or long open water swims or anything like that. My longest bike, I did a couple of century rides. So the longest ended up being like 105 or something like that. And the longest run was probably 16 miles, but I did have a weekend where I did 20, 11 one day and 10 the next.
Okay. So you did 11 on Saturday and 9 on Sunday?
Yeah.
What was this like for you? What else did you do that weekend?
I was actually traveling. I was up in Maine for a friend's wedding, and I'd been traveling before that too. I had Thursday off of work, and so and unfortunately that was when the bits of Hurricane Michael that we got in Atlanta hit. And so I was on the trainer and did 88 miles on the trainer, which I don't recommend to anybody. And I did that on Thursday, and then Friday I was flying up to Maine, and then Saturday, Sunday I was up in Maine. And then, flew back and went back to regular life on Monday.
Wow. So going into this big race of the season, did you do a lot of strength training in the gym?
I did some, a lot of body weight, some lifting heavy, but mostly body weight, and a lot of yoga. Really? Yeah. There's at my office on Mondays, over the lunch hour, they have free yoga. So I've been doing that. Wow. So I guess it's not a lot, but it's more than I had been doing.
Okay. Now on your long bike rides and long runs, what are you using for nutrition?
Long bike rides have really been about practicing my nutrition plan and, getting it refined. And so I was using the same homemade energy bites that I used on the race. My water was diluted coconut water. I did a lot of, I guess, supported century rides. And so in that case, every aid station was whatever they had there, the rolling buffet of a century ride. And then runs, my nutrition plan is a little less refined on the run just because I really haven't found exactly what works best for me yet. But I would do a couple scoops of UCAN before going out on the long run and then carry a gel if I needed it. And then have the same diluted coconut water for my fluids.
Okay, so why use coconut water at all?
The electrolytes and the sugar. I actually don't like the taste of it, which is why I dilute it. But it's something that I've gotten used to, just because it gives a little bit more than just water, but it doesn't have the sugary spike of Gatorade.
Okay, so you're trying to keep your blood sugar lower, it seems like.
Yes. Yeah.
What's your thought process of keeping that lower versus using other things that spike your blood sugar?
Getting my body to kind of do more fat burning and fat adapting, which it's really not going to do all that well if you keep spiking blood sugar. So that's kind of the thought process behind that.
Okay, so I guess in training leading up to this race, you're wanting to lose weight or sustain weight versus gain weight with all the sugary drinks?
Right.
Did that work well for you?
I sustained pretty well. I didn't really lose. I did, way back in January, I did a month of Whole30 and, went off of grains and all of that. And I did lose a lot of weight with that. And I kind of maintained a lot of that during the season of, most of my carbs coming from starchy vegetables as opposed to grains. Definitely not as strict about it as I was during the month I did Whole30, but, I think it made a difference as far as my endurance and then, also weight management and whatnot.
Okay. So as far as your day-to-day nutrition, what is that like?
Like I said, most of my carbs are coming from starchy vegetables, a lot of protein. Protein and vegetables is pretty much how you can sum it up.
Okay. So you're not doing the typical carb loading before the big weekends or anything like that?
Not really, no.
Okay. Do you have a go-to meal that you like to get before a big workout?
Not really. Before long bike rides, the night before I tended to cook a meal, which was sweet potato, chicken sausage, apple, and kale. But mostly I did that because it's convenient to pack up the leftovers and eat it right after the bike ride. So it seemed to work for me.
Okay. So going into this race, what workouts did you do that gave you the confidence to go into this race prepared?
It was actually the Pilgrimman half iron distance race that gave me the most confidence. Just how strong I felt on the run after the bike. But then also my last century ride was, it was a supported ride that I'd done in Birmingham, Alabama. And afterwards I think I ran 4 or 5 miles and I felt really strong. And I was like, okay, if I can bike 105 miles and then feel this strong consistently for the next 40 minutes, I think I've got a chance to make this a good race. And so those were the things I thought back on when I was getting nervous. It's like, okay, you did these long workouts before and you felt really strong. And so you can do that here.
Okay. So being this is your second full, you kind of had an idea of what to expect along the way. Did you do more this time going into the full versus the first time?
The first time I didn't have a coach. I used an online training program that I found. I really don't have problems being disciplined to my workouts. If I have it written down, I'm probably going to do it. And so the problem wasn't that I was skipping workouts or that I needed somebody to keep me accountable. It was really a matter of tweaking things to make more sense for me. If something isn't working, having a coach meant that he can say, okay, this isn't working, let's try this instead, as opposed to just doing exactly what the training program says because that's what it says to do. Other than that, I can't really think of any big differences between what I did then and what I did now, other than I was just smarter about it this time.
Okay. So knowing that you built up to about 17 hours a week, were there any days where you just mentally didn't want to train?
Not really. I mean, there were days where it was hard, timing wise, and then also just mentally like, hey, go do this. But it wasn't anything that I felt like I was dragging my feet, and there weren't any that I was skipping workouts unless, there's something that I knew I had to ahead of time, like I had a work thing at night and I couldn't get on the trainer that night or something like that.
Okay. So as far as your training goes, you're building up to 17 hours. You have basically a part-time job with just training. And you have a full-time job of 40 hours a week. And that's not counting the travel to and from work. And I'm assuming you have some friends that you want to hang out with outside of work. How are you balancing life, work, and training?
Well, I'm pretty introverted, so hanging out with friends isn't something that is, it's not something that I just absolutely have to do. And I really enjoy hanging out with the people on my tri-team. And so that was one of those things that's like, hey, let's go for a long ride, and then we'll go get lunch afterwards. So, yeah.
Okay. So going into this race, did you make any sacrifices from work or family or anything like that?
I knew that I wouldn't be able to do any of those, like, hey, it's Friday night, let's go out. I knew that there wouldn't be any of that. And yeah, there were some things that came up at work, like, opportunities to travel at work that I ended up turning down because of races that I had scheduled. But yeah, so there were sacrifices that I made. But we'll see how it goes now that I'm into the off season.
Right. So going into this race, what was your taper like?
Let's see. Started a couple weeks ahead of time. My last long workout was a 70-mile ride and a 6-mile run. So a brick workout. And then it was 2 weeks of tapering where I got, the last brick that I did beforehand, or I guess weekend brick, was 30 miles on the bike and 3-mile run. And then, everything just got a little bit shorter over those last 2 weeks.
Okay. So as far as your lodging and your travel goes, when did you actually want to book your travel and your lodging and all that?
I ended up driving down to Florida. It was a 7-hour drive. My friend who peer pressured me into the race, she lives in Tampa. And so with the change to Haines City, it was actually pretty convenient because that's an hour away from her house. So on Thursday, before the race, I drove down to her house, and I stayed there Thursday night and Friday night. And then Saturday and Sunday, we stayed in the Holiday Inn Express in Winter Haven, I think is the name of the town.
Okay. So how were you feeling with the hurricane that hit Panama City the week and a half before the race? And then you're like, oh, are they going to do anything now? What was your take on this?
There was a lot of nervous planning. I was still doing all my training because I knew that something was going to happen, regardless of if they canceled the race, if they deferred it, if they moved it, I knew something was going to happen. So I stuck with my training, and I came up with, I guess different courses of action. This is my Army history coming out here. So, if they canceled the race outright, possibly doing Cozumel 2 weeks later, possibly doing the 70.3 in New Orleans, which would have been the week of the 21st of October. And then just saying, okay, it was a 70.3, but I'm going to call the season done. And then possibly deferring to next year, which I didn't want to do. So yeah, I was just coming up with alternative plans and bouncing them by my coach and by some of my friends on my team, to see what they thought. And then actually when Ironman, made the announcement that they were still going to have it, it was going to be the same weekend and it was going to be in Haines City, it actually ended up working out perfectly because it was kind of the best situation was that it was, all of my timing would still be there as far as, the peak week and taper and everything. And I would still be going down to Florida.
Nice. Because I'm sure you saw some of the videos of Panama City that just got obliterated. I guess that's the word.
Yeah.
Obliterated? I messed that word all up. But it got destroyed by the hurricane, and people were just frantically going, how are they going to be doing this? Maybe it's not the best time to have a lot of people visit the city, and how are they going to handle this? And it was actually the weekend of Kona that they made the decision to change it to Haines City, I think.
Yeah, so I'm in a couple of Facebook groups for Ironman Florida, and there was a lot of speculation leading up to the official announcement. And then after the announcement, there were actually a lot of people who were very angry, which surprised me a lot.
Really?
Yeah. It was a minority, but it was a very vocal minority. And I think the reasons that they were angry is because the rental properties that they had in Panama City Beach wouldn't cancel on them. And they just, kind of transferred that anger to Ironman. I don't know what Ironman could have done in that situation. By no means was Panama City Beach equipped at that point to handle a race of that magnitude. But yeah, just the anger that some people had, it's kind of astounding, but the fact that they managed to pull off moving a race with, less than 3 weeks ahead of time, getting all the permits and everything, that was an amazing feat to me.
I mean, a 112-mile bike course, regardless of where that is, even if it is 2, 3, even 4 loops, you're talking at least 26 miles of road. You're talking how many counties is that going through, cities, how many cop districts, so many different things. And if it's just a straight out and back, I mean, how many more cities is that? I mean, they did a phenomenal job on moving it so quickly and getting everything pulled.
Yes.
So going into Haines City, knowing that this is going to be a different course than what you had initially trained for, how are you preparing for this mentally?
There was, like I said, all of the chatter in the Facebook groups, a lot of people were upset about the elevation, but then when I looked at the maps and did the math, all of my training in Atlanta has been a lot hillier than that. And so, yes, it's more of an elevation change than Panama City Beach, but it was still a lot less than what I was training with and a lot less than any race that I had done already in the season. And so it it was another confidence boost to me. It's like, okay, this isn't the perfectly flat course that you thought you were doing, but you've trained in a lot harder and you've raced in a lot harder and you've done fine.
Right. So what was the actual elevation of the bike course that they put out?
I think it was about 2,700 feet over 112 miles.
That's not bad.
No, it's pretty flat. I think I can hit that in about 40 or 50 miles biking outside Atlanta.
I mean, in comparison to what it normally is, that's just a little bit, that's almost triple basically of what it normally is. So for the run course, what was the run elevation?
842, I think.
Okay. So did you prepare and train with heels?
Yeah. I mean, an 8-mile run in my neighborhood would get me about 1,000 feet of elevation gain. So I definitely was doing a lot of hill training.
It sounds like you're on the Comet.
No, the Comet's actually pretty flat. I don't really go to the Comet too much because it's very congested. Most of my runs I just do in my neighborhood. And then biking, I go up to Cartersville usually Cartersville.
Okay. So going into this race, you wanted to actually get to the race venue on what day?
Went for packet pickup on Friday. And so that was the first time seeing the race venue, walking, the swim through transition to the bike through transition to the run, just walking those courses because it was kind of difficult to visualize on the map. And it looked like a lot greater distance for transitions than it actually was. And so just walking through that, getting that feel of, okay, this is the way that things are going to go on race day. Did on Saturday, when I went back for, to drop off the bike and whatnot, I ended up biking and running that first little bit of the course, just to get an idea of what that felt like and what it would feel like to start. That was pretty much the routine for Friday and Saturday.
Okay. So what was your impression of packet pickup and Ironman Village here?
We ended up getting to packet pickup about 10-15 minutes after one of the race meetings started, and so there was nobody actually in the tent other than volunteers, and so it was a very quick packet pickup. I think it was the quickest one that I've ever done. And then the village was a lot of fun. I spent way too much money, both in the merch tent and then at the Rudy tent. Played with the air relax systems, which I have at home already. And just seeing what everyone brought.
Nice. So after you get your packet and all this fun stuff, you get your bike all patched up with your stickers and all your numbers. You go to bike check-in the day after that, which is Saturday. What's your bike check-in process like?
Like I said, I went on a quick ride beforehand, I think about 6 miles. And then there wasn't much of a line to get into bike drop-off because it was about an hour and a half after bike drop-off started. So the people who got there early were already in. So walked through, numbers checked to my wristband, then they took a picture of my bike, and then went to the rack. I didn't deal with pumping the tires or anything like that at that point because I knew I would do that on Sunday morning.
Okay. So as far as nutrition the day before the race, what does this look like for you? Are you going to get a certain meal in the day before the race?
We went out for Mexican for dinner, which is actually a pretty long-standing tradition. Goes back years of having Mexican food the night before. People like to laugh, but it's a lot of rice and corn and then, vegetables and protein, and a lot of salt.
Right. So are you going to get in bed at a certain time?
Let's see. I think I was in bed at about 8.
Okay. What time did you want to actually get up and start getting your day started?
I got up at 4. Transition opened at 4:30, but we ended up getting there at around 5. So got up at 4, had my overnight oats that I had percolating, and then drove to the race site, found parking, and then went and got everything set up at the bike, dropped my morning clothes bag and went down to the swim start.
Okay. So before you actually leave the Holiday Inn Express, what are you doing before you actually leave? You're getting up, getting your overnight oats, and do you have anything else that you're doing to prepare for the day?
Putting on my kit, and I'd packed my bags the night before, so just pretty much grabbing those and taking them down to the car.
Okay. What are you putting in all of your bags?
I had all of my my water bottles, so the all the bottles for the bike and my bottle for the run. And then I had some more coconut water to put in my run special needs. And I had a couple of just a couple odds and ends for the special needs, an extra tube and an extra CO2 for the bike special needs. Some plantain chips for both. One of the hot shot cramp things for the run. And then turned in special needs bag when I got to the site.
Okay. So knowing that it might rain, did you do anything different to prepare for this?
Not really. I'd raced in the rain and trained in the rain before, so it wasn't anything that unusual. I just made sure that my gear bags were tied pretty tightly, so if it did rain, that not much water would get in there. That was about it.
Okay. Do you know about the large size or jumbo size Ziploc bags that you can use to keep everything dry?
I did know about those, and I keep meaning to buy some for these races, and I didn't.
Wow. So as far as the day of, did you really have to worry about parking or anything like that?
Yeah, there were no designated parking other than, find something on the street in this, general area. So I am terrible at finding parking. So there's a lot of going back and forth on, these city blocks until we found a place. And it was actually only about 2 blocks away from the finish line. So found something, close, but it took us a while to find it.
Okay. So after you get there in transition, how is transition set up here? Is it on grass, concrete? What was this like here?
The bike. So transition was in a parking lot essentially. And it's kind of hard to describe, but it was almost like there were 2 different tiers. So when you entered, you can either go up, into the right, or you can go down into the left. My bike was up and to the right. Okay.
So it was divided. How would you best describe how it was divided? Like, I don't understand here.
Smaller numbers were to the right, and then it ended up looping around on the other side. So it was like one giant loop. And so it kind of went from smaller to larger. So people who were in the larger half of the numbers would go to the left, and people in the smaller half of the numbers went to the right.
Okay. So in transition, you're pumping your tires up to 110, putting all your calories on your bike, and basically getting a good understanding of where you're at. Knowing that this is probably going to be a wetsuit legal race, you're using a wetsuit. Are you using a full sleeve or a sleeveless?
I have sleeveless. I actually have the DeSoto T1, but I have what is it called? The speed tube and the speed vest. So the 2-piece wetsuit that doesn't involve the overalls for the bib for the pants is just a pair of pants, and then the vest is sleeveless.
Okay, so it's a 2-piece wetsuit, it sounds like.
Yes.
You like that?
Yeah, I don't really like wetsuits. Probably because of my swimming background and not having them, when I was learning how to swim. And I like the fact that I can, if it's a little bit warmer but still wetsuit legal, I can just wear the pants and not worry about the vest. And also the way that the zipper is on the vest, there's nothing to chafe against my neck, which has always been a big problem with wetsuits.
So you always chafe on your neck, it sounds like?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But it's not a problem with the 2-piece.
Nice.
Yeah.
So as you're getting everything ready to head down to the swim start, what time are you seeing yourself at? Because this is a rolling start, right?
I put myself in the 1 hour to 1:10, and I knew I could have done faster, but I wanted, as my coach likes to remind me, my slow swim is faster than a lot of people's fast swim, so there's no need to, start burning down the candle at the swim. So just take it nice and easy. And so I ended up finishing in 1:05.
Right. Now, for the swim, before you're actually getting in the water, what is the tension and the atmosphere there like?
It was a lot of nervous energy. So I was both in me and the other people. So I was just chatting with other people, who was on their first, who was on their 20th, just stuff like that.
Okay. So being this is your second, you've done this before, but not here. And what was this like for you at this race?
It was definitely a lot different than my other full, because back when I did, my other full was Switzerland in 2014, and that was back still in the days of the mass start. So doing a rolling start was definitely a lot more civilized, starting with 2,500 of your closest friends. I forgot where I was going with that. The course is also a lot different. The course is kind of an interesting M shape or pants shape. And so I knew that I'd have to be doing a lot of sighting to make sure that I was hitting all of the turn buoys.
Okay, because from what I understand of the swim course, you go out, you take a right, then you go down, back on itself, but at an angle. Then you go around a buoy, then you go back up, then you go around another buoy, then you go down, around another buoy, go back up, and then come all the way back in on that stretch, and then you get out, then you go back in?
Yep, and do the same thing again.
Okay. And it's just like what you said, the shape of an M, basically. So it's like the exact same Haines City course.
Yes. Yeah, it was the exact same.
Okay. So going into this swim, knowing that you're going to have to sight quite a bit, did you have an idea of which way you wanted to sight? Where did you want to breathe to? Or any strategies that you wanted to execute?
I bi-lateral breathe, which makes sighting pretty easy because I can just, kind of at the middle of the stroke, kind of lift my eyes to just above the water and see where I am. And then the biggest thing with this being a 2-lap course is that I knew that the first lap was going to be pretty clear because I was really only swimming with people who were also around my pace. But then the second lap would be pretty crowded because I'd be catching up with the people who started later.
Right.
And that's exactly the situation.
Okay. So for this, did you use tinted goggles or clear goggles?
I used, well, I guess they're my clear ones. They're yellow tinted, but they're not polarized.
Okay. So being that you're coming from a swimming background and you're actually going pretty fast in comparison to some of the swimmers I've talked with and athletes I've talked with, what are some tips that you would give somebody that isn't a swimmer that comes from a swimming background that's going to be doing this race?
Somebody that doesn't come from a swimming background?
Yes.
Because of all of the turns and the turn buoy, sighting is super important. And that's always the advice that I give to anybody who's either not done open water before or isn't that confident in open water, is just make sure that you're sighting frequently. At a lot of these races, I see people who are going, at pretty extreme angles across my path because they just have no idea where they're going. And you're really not going to be able to swim straight unless you're sighting and you're seeing where you are. The other bit of advice that I typically give people is if you get really nervous and really anxious around a lot of people, is to go off to the side where there are fewer people. You may be swimming a little bit longer in total distance because you're going wider around the buoys, but if you can keep your anxiety down, then that's going to end up evening itself out, and you come out ahead if you can keep your anxiety down, even if you're swimming extra. Right. It's a little bit harder in this course to swim off to the side because of all of the turns. So really my biggest advice for this one would have just been make sure that you're sighting frequently, make sure that you know where you're going.
Okay. So before you get in the swim, do you have a last minute little bit of nutrition that you're getting in before you hit in?
I do a couple scoops of the Generation UCAN Super Starch about half an hour before.
Okay. So we already talked a little bit about the swim course. How did the swim go for you?
It went really great. I felt great. I would have happily done a third lap if that's what the race was. I felt really strong. I was really happy with my performance, and I enjoyed it.
Okay. So after you get out of the swim, you're in T1 for less than 9 minutes here. How does T1 go for you?
It also went really well. So I ended up needing the help of the wetsuit strippers to get my wetsuit off, and that resulted in me being covered in sand. And I kind of showered off a little bit. They had the showers going on the way up to the community center where T1 was. So kind of showered off a little bit, but was still pretty covered in sand. But by the time I, got my, the volunteers were doing a great job of calling out numbers and having the bags ready when people got up to them. So grabbed my bag, went up to the community center, and I was surprised to see that one of my friends from a master swim team was volunteering in the changing tent in T1. So that was nice and a nice surprise and fun to get to see a familiar face. And she was helping me with getting everything ready. Handing me my shoes. I didn't put the shoes on because there was still a quarter-mile run to the bike, so I carried the shoes. But just getting me everything that I needed and giving me that confidence boost before I headed out toward the bike.
Wow. So going into the bike here, knowing that you're going to be on the bike for more than 6 hours here,
right?
How are you preparing yourself mentally for this?
Just reminding myself to keep calm. The problem with being a fast swimmer and a mediocre cyclist is that I am hitting the start of the bike at the same time as all of the super fast triathletes. And so people are just flying by me. And so I had to remind myself that this is the time to check the ego, let them do their thing. Don't try to keep up, just try to keep my power down to where in the area where it needed to be, because I knew I was going to be on the bike for a while.
Right. So after you get out of the first few miles here, how is the bike course feeling for you for the first 15, 20 miles?
It was feeling about what I expected. It took me about 5 miles to get myself to calm down. That's always a problem for me. Again, just because of all of the people passing me, but also, my heart rate gets up during the run in T1. And so just getting myself to calm down, getting my heart rate down to where I needed it to be. So that took probably about 5 miles. And then I was feeling pretty good. My legs started to feel a little, I really don't know how to describe it, kind of punkish. When I was approaching the mile 28 aid station. And also I was feeling like I needed to use the porta potty. So I said, okay, take the couple minutes to get off the bike, use the porta potty, and your legs will feel better. And sure enough, they did.
Okay. So with making this pit stop here, did that impact your strategy for the bike ride?
What was that? Oh, my legs. No, not really, because I knew that I would probably be, stretching out, at least a couple times during the 112 miles. And so it was just, the strategy was if I needed to stop, to make the stops quick. So a few minutes at the most. And I was actually really happy with, just that short few steps of walking from the bike rack to the porta potty and then back, like how much that stretched my legs out and how much better my legs felt as soon as I got back on the bike.
Okay. So from a strategy perspective, you actually wanted to hit a certain intensity factor on the bike ride based off of your power. What was it like? And you also probably had a cadence number in mind as well.
Yeah. So my cadence number was between what I'd been training on for the last couple months before the race. And then intensity factor that I wanted to hold was between 60 and 65%. And so in the first bit, I was actually overshooting that, which I figured would happen because there were a couple of climbs right out of T1 that kind of shot the intensity factor up. And then since intensity factor is an average over the entire ride, I knew that would shoot it up, and then I would have to bring it back down. And so it actually took probably the first 30 miles to bring it back down to under 65%. And then I managed, from then on, I managed to hold it between the 60 to 65%.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about cadence earlier and how you got to this number. Did you hit exactly what you wanted to on the cadence?
I think so. There were a couple times going downhill that I was going over 80, and then there were a couple times on the uphill that I was going in the high 60s. And I was okay with that as long as I was keeping my average, closer to the lower to mid 70s, than higher than that.
Okay. So as far as the bike ride goes, how are the aid stations here?
They were great. They were every 14 miles, which, from a planning perspective, was perfect for me. I like to keep things as symmetrical as possible, as much as you can at a race. And so the fact that they were split so evenly, one every eighth of the course essentially, was absolutely perfect. The aid stations were very well stocked, which I really only took water, but I know a lot of people were taking Gatorade and food and whatnot. And then all of the aid stations had, I think 3 porta potties and also racks to put the bikes if you needed to use the porta potty. So I was really happy with the organization, and the spacing of the aid stations.
Okay. Now, did you have enough time to discard what you didn't need?
Yeah. So I was able to, so the way that they had it set up was water, Gatorade, food, Gatorade, water. And so I grabbed a bottle when I needed water, I grabbed a bottle at the first water, dumped it into my speed fill, and then was able to toss it off to the side, with plenty of time before hitting that last trash sign.
Okay. So as far as the bike ride goes for the first 50, 60 miles, did you see a lot of flats or any wrecks?
A couple flats, didn't see any wrecks.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
With this bike course, how were the turns? Were they pretty good? Were they well marked? Was the course well marked? Potholes, road quality? What was all this like?
The turns were all very well marked, both with tape and then volunteers and police officers. The intersections, the bigger intersections had police officers who were stopping traffic and directing traffic, and so that was very helpful. There weren't a whole lot of hazards in terms of potholes and whatnot on the bike, but they were all marked when they did exist.
Okay. So whenever you start getting towards the middle portion of the bike ride, 50, 60, and 70, how's your nutrition plan going? Are you hitting exactly what you want with getting about 300 calories an hour in? Are you swaying from that a little bit? What is this? I
was hitting that pretty much perfectly. I also had a small baggie of plantain chips in my special needs bag and a hazelnut in my plantain or in my special needs bag, and so I grabbed both of those. And I kind of like the nice salty snack with the plantain chips, although it's kind of hard to eat things out of a plastic baggie when in Aero. And then the Snickers bar, I didn't end up eating all of it, but it was just, again, a fun little treat for halfway through.
Something to break up the monotonous stuff that you've been eating.
Right.
Okay. So after that portion of the bike ride, miles 80 and 90, these are usually a little tougher for everybody. How are you holding up mentally here? Because by this point, you've been on the bike for about 5 hours, and you still got about an hour and a half left. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. The biggest hills were at, I'd say probably mile 30, so then that would have been around 85 on the second loop, and then there was one a few miles later, which still weren't that big of hills, so I knew that those were coming. And then I like to do some simple arithmetic to keep myself occupied on the bike, and so I was doing that, like, okay, if you hold this pace, you have this many miles left. If you hold this pace, you'll be finished at this time. The hardest thing mentally was knowing that there was a stretch that happened about miles 50 to 54 on the first lap, so it would have been, about mile 106 to 110, I guess, on the second lap of pretty rough road in terms of, I think it was a chip seal road, so it's a little bit rougher quality. So the hardest part mentally was knowing that I would have to do that 4-ish mile stretch again. And, starting to get a little bit saddle sore at that point. So, kind of anticipating that wouldn't be feeling all that comfortable when I hit that stretch.
Right. So mentally, you're holding up pretty well then, because you're able to actually stay focused and keep yourself occupied. Right.
I was also feeling pretty sunburnt, which also got my mind off of the monotony of being on the bike. So it was just having other things to focus on other than the fact that, I'd been on the bike for so long and I still had X number of minutes left. Just kind of helped my mental game.
Okay. So after you get past mile 105, because that's where you stop training, how are you feeling there?
Pretty good, other than knowing that stretch of crappy road was about to start. But, it was only a few miles further than the longest ride that I'd had, so I knew I was in pretty good shape.
So how long is this section of bad road you're talking about?
It was about 4 miles.
Okay, that's not too bad, but it's right there at the end, and you don't really want to go through it.
Right, yeah.
Man. So after you get towards the later portion of the bike ride, the last few miles, I know everybody does this, and they think, okay, my bike ride went well, it went good, it went crappy, it went bad. How did you think of your bike ride?
I thought it went really well. I would have been happy with anything under 7 hours, and I was shooting for about 6.5. So I ended up being right in the ballpark that I wanted to be, and so I was pretty content with how that went.
Good. So towards the last 2 miles, are you doing anything different to prepare to start running?
Not really. I know some people, shift down, or some people change their cadence at this point, but I just kept riding. That was probably the rolliest part, is that one stretch right at the beginning and right at the end. And really it was just a matter of concentrating on making sure that I was doing those hills smartly, but also, you get a little bit more congestion, obviously, at the end, and then there were runners on the road as well, and so just making sure that I was being smart with my handling was keeping me focused on that.
Okay. So as you get into T2, how does T2 go for you? You're there just under 7.5 minutes.
Yeah, it also went pretty well. I took so I got to bike dismount, handed my bike off, and at that point I took my shoes off because, again, there was about a 1/4 mile run to the changing area, and so I carried my bike shoes in my hand and just ran in my socks. And I get there and I had pretty much a full costume change. Got out of my bike clothes.
Costume change.
Yeah.
I've heard of a kit change, run gear change, but not a costume change.
Yeah.
What were you putting on as a costume?
Oh, I wish it was a costume. No, it was just, I just changed out of my bike clothes and into my running clothes. So it was, just compression shorts and a clean, dry tank top. And then, underwear and a sports bra compared to the tri-kit I was previously wearing. And I also took my chest strap heart rate monitor off, because 26 miles is a lot of chafing for that. And I have a Garmin 935, so it has the wrist heart rate monitor on it. It's not as good, but I knew it would serve the purpose that I needed. And I wasn't really watching it. I was just kind of looking at it for data afterwards.
So what do you mean it's not as good?
It's not as accurate. It takes it longer. It's not right to say it takes it longer to register changes, but it's kind of what it is. Just because you're further away from the heart and the electrical activity and whatnot. It's not as accurate.
Okay. So, as you're getting out on the run, what was your strategy to execute the run?
I knew I was going to walk through the aid stations, and beyond that, I really hadn't put too much thought into strategy other than tried not to burn myself out at the beginning. So I ran to the first aid station, which included running up a couple hills, and then I realized that I could probably afford to walk up some of the hills and just save a little bit of energy, because I did have 26.2 miles to do, and so that kind of became the strategy: is walk the aid stations and walk the hills. And that worked out pretty well. I was able to hold that consistently.
Okay. So did you want to walk out of transition or run out of transition?
I did run out of transition.
Okay. So if you kind of look back on it now, did you run faster that first mile of the run, or was that first mile slower?
The first mile was faster than any other mile.
Okay. So I actually try to tell people, hey, just hold on, hold your horses a little bit, and walk out of transition, get your idea, get your legs under you, get a little bit of nutrition in, and then start running a little bit. And whatever you think you're doing, slow it down even more.
Exactly. And that's something that I try to tell myself as well, let the run come to me as opposed to me trying to force it. It did also help that I had to stop for a minute coming out of transition to get sunscreened. Because again, I was pretty sunburnt coming off of the bike. And so I wanted to make sure that I was, because I still had a couple hours until sunset at this point. I wanted to make sure that I had sunscreen on my exposed skin.
Okay. At this point, was the weather starting to rain at all?
It was pretty overcast. And it occasionally started to sprinkle, but there weren't any of the downpours that came later.
Okay. Because you finished before the downpours.
Yes.
Okay. So your nutrition plan for the run, what did this look like?
So again, this is a little bit more hodgepodge than it is for the bike, because it's harder for me to plan my run nutrition. I tend to get a lot of problems with nausea, and so having a strict plan doesn't really work out for me all the time. So I had the same diluted coconut water in my handheld that I was doing on the bike. And then I had a couple of the Crank Sports e-fuel gels. But really the plan at every aid station to grab something, whether it's, a swallow of water just to rinse the taste out of my mouth, maybe a little bit of Coca-Cola, a slice of banana, just to get something. And so that was pretty much what I did. It was mostly, sips of Coke, which is what I was doing, other than what I was carrying.
Okay. So you had an idea of what you're going to do versus just going out there and saying, well, I'll just see what the aid stations have.
Right. I knew what the stations would have, which helped. And I knew I knew that they would have gels, but I didn't want to grab their gels. And so I knew if I was grabbing anything from the aid stations in terms of food, it would have been bananas and pretzels. Okay.
So as far as the first 5 miles go on the run, what does this look like and feel like for you?
Let's see. It actually felt pretty good. So it felt pretty good. Again, it's kind of hot. But I knew it would be. And so it was just a matter of keeping my feet moving. And again, I was walking up the uphills just to conserve. And when I got to that stretch where all of the tri-team tents were and all the spectators were, so stretch right in front of the lake, it was a lot of energy. And it was really exciting to see people, and to have people cheering. And yeah, it was good. I felt good.
Wow. So as far as your strategy for the run, from a pacing or heart rate perspective, what does this look like?
I'd been doing a lot of zone 2 training in my training, so a lot of keeping my heart rate at or below 145, but I didn't want to be focused on that during the race, and so I wasn't really even watching my heart rate during the race. I wasn't really watching my pace. It was just a matter, I was really going by how I felt. And I was feeling pretty good through the entire first loop, and I think I only walked aid stations and uphills. I don't think I walked anything more than that.
Okay, so you wanted to go off of how you felt, but how did you want to feel, and knowing that RPE can be really subjective in that moment, how are you keeping an eye on that?
I wanted to feel like I can keep moving. That was what the goal is. I didn't want to get to the point where I felt like any step would have to be my last. I just wanted to continuously feel like I was strong enough to finish. And then, yeah, and the uphills and the aid stations kept me honest, and kept me in check to keep me from getting too excited and taking off.
Right. So you've done a previous Ironman and you've done 3 70.3s this year. How would you compare the crowd support on the course to the other races you've done?
That's actually a good question. There weren't really any dead points of this run course in terms of crowd support.
Really?
Yeah, I guess maybe the first out and back before really getting into the loops. There were fewer spectators there. But other than that, it seemed like everywhere I went, there was somebody cheering. And so that was fun to have that kind of energy. And it, obviously most people weren't cheering for me. But, people would see my bib and say, you're looking good, Elizabeth, or keep it up, 904. And so that was, even though I didn't know them, it was encouraging. Yeah, I thought the community really came out for this one.
Wow, that's good to hear, because this really isn't this isn't really their race, and for them to come out and support this is like kind of warming, because as like I'm trying to put myself in a local situation of like, well, this was forced upon them in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And now then they have to accommodate this specific race. And along those lines, did you hear about after the race what had happened on the bike course?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that after this and go into the details of that. As far as the run goes, how are you feeling after you pass a run special needs?
So I ended up picking up my special needs at the start of the third loop, and that was my plan. Is that was when I would stop, but I would be, because you can only access run special needs once, even though it was at the point where you were at mile 4, 11, or 18. So the plan was to stop at 18, but to be okay if I needed to stop at 11. In terms, like if I needed something in terms of cramping or nutrition or something, that I would be okay with it if I had to stop at 11. I still felt good at 11, so I stopped there at 18. And it actually, I don't know if it was the fact that I was, standing still for a minute, or, the plantain chips or the fresh coconut water, or what the deal was, but it was just like, it felt like a second wind. And so even though the third lap, I wasn't running fast, I was running more than I was in the second lap.
Wow. So you knew that you were feeling pretty good. Did you have any GI issues or cramping at all? No,
surprisingly, because usually I can't make it in a run longer than 10 or so miles without feeling nauseated.
Okay. So after you get done with the last loop here, you're entering to the last, say, 4 or 5 miles of the race. How are you feeling mentally? Are you holding up pretty well?
I am. Again, I'm doing some simple arithmetic, and the goal had been a sub 14. And looking at the pace that I'd been doing and where I was in terms of time, I realized I can possibly do a sub 13 if I kept it up and kept strong. And so that was a little bit of a confidence boost there, as well as a little bit of incentive to keep moving, is to see if I can break that 13-hour mark.
Wow. So what was your previous time at full?
14:17.
Wow. So this was a nice PR for you.
Yeah, about almost an hour and a half.
Nice. So as far as the hills on the run course, how would you compare those to the other courses you've done, like Chattanooga 70.3, for instance?
Oh, it was so much less than that. It was so much more flat than that.
Wow.
I think the elevation gain in Chattanooga was the same for the half as the elevation gain for the full down in Haines City.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you had plenty more miles to spread that out over.
Right.
So as far as the run course goes, did you see anything funny on the run course?
Funny, like, make me laugh, or funny, like, it shouldn't have been that way?
Both.
Well, a lot of the spectators and a lot of the signs were pretty entertaining. So I enjoyed that. As far as funny, the way it shouldn't be, there was one point when we're doing a lot of these up and down, these blocks, up and down city blocks in a neighborhood. There were a lot of people, and this is where the whole idea of the race being forced upon them was evident, is there were people who were trying to drive out of the neighborhood. But, you have all of these people running down their street. And so there were people who weren't paying as close of attention as they should have been. I didn't see anybody get hit by any means, but there were definitely a lot of people who were getting yelled at by the police who were there for route support.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So as far as the last mile and a half of the run course goes, what does this look like and feel like for you?
The last mile and a half included the last, I guess, little diversion into a neighborhood. Which, again, the nice thing about doing loops is I knew everything that would be coming next. And so it helped to anticipate. So it was the last little dip into a neighborhood, go down a cul-de-sac, come back up, go back out onto 10th Street. And then there was another little hill, and then it was a matter of turning down the finish chute.
Wow. So the finish chute here, what was this like for you?
It was exciting, because, at this point I've been, almost 13 hours of constant movement. So it was exciting for it to be finishing. And, again, there was so much energy and so much excitement. And I was just happy to be a part of that.
Wow. So as you're getting the last 200 yards of the finish line, you realize that you're getting a solid hour and a half PR. What emotions are you feeling about this?
A lot of relief, and a lot of excitement, and just very happy.
Wow. Because that's pretty awesome to have a solid 90-minute PR at a race like this.
Right. Granted, the courses are so completely different, so, it's hard to compare. But, yeah, it was, definitely, I was feeling very proud of myself for everything that I accomplished all season that led up to that.
Wow. So, after you finish, what'd you get to do next?
I took the week mostly off, went swimming a couple times, and then, for the long weekend here, I, retreated to the North Georgia mountains and went for a bit of a hike yesterday. It's the first time having a weekend that was completely free for whatever I wanted to do, whether that be free from work or free from training. And then I'm going to slowly get into the off season. So I'm going to do more trail running, some mountain biking, and then prepare myself for a couple of half marathons. And then my first big race next year will be Ironman 70.3 St. George in May.
Wow. That's going to be a tough course.
Yeah. Not expecting a PR on that one.
No, I wouldn't. So how was your recovery process from this race?
A lot better than from the first one.
What'd you do different?
I think just being better trained. I wasn't as sore when I finished the race. Like I didn't have as much second day soreness, on Monday. And really my calves were kind of tight and my hips definitely were feeling it. But after a couple of days I was feeling a lot better.
Okay. So what's something that you learned from this race that you'd like to pass on to someone who hasn't done this race before?
Race your own race is probably the biggest thing. Is don't get caught up in what other people are doing. But also, even if it's a flat race, don't be afraid to train on some hills. Because they're really going to make you stronger.
Right. So, As far as this situation of the race venue changing, what's something that you would tell someone that's encountering this situation in the future?
Keep your head about you during the times of uncertainty. So we had about a week between when Michael hit Panama City Beach and the announcement that it was going to be moved to Haines City. And so there was a lot of anxiety. A lot of people had stopped training. A lot of people were counting on, a deferral to Florida 2019 or a refund or something. So just keep your head about you. Keep training as if the race will happen, because it did. It was a day later in a different location, but the race still happened on the same weekend. And so I'm glad I didn't deviate from the training. But then to have a plan ready to execute as soon as the announcement came out. So if the announcement came that it was just going to be canceled outright, I had a plan for what I was going to do as soon as that announcement was made.
Just wait for the official announcement. Don't get into the clutter and the rants that everybody's going into. Yes,
wait for the official announcement is probably the biggest take-home message. So many people had, as soon as the hurricane hit Panama City Beach, they went ahead and registered for Cozumel. And then the big thing was, well, now I'm registered for Cozumel and Haines City, and they're only 2 weeks apart. Don't jump the gun. Wait until Ironman tells you what the plan is, because they will have a plan. It'll be something. So just wait and hear what that plan is.
Okay. Now, how could Ironman have made your race experience better with all this?
There was nothing that they could have done. The race they did a phenomenal job of, like we were talking about earlier, moving a race to a new location that had never hosted a 140.6 before, getting the course out. I don't even think they could have communicated any earlier, because, there's transparency, but then there is also too much transparency. So if they had told people, hey, we're looking into moving it to Haines City, they would have been, and then things fell through, there would have been a lot of disappointment there. So the fact that they communicated that there was a plan was good. And I know a lot of people said that they should have communicated it sooner, but, Ironman was also dealing with Kona at the time.
Well, Kona and Louisville, then Arizona 7.3. And then Waco was also facing its unique challenges, which was also before Florida. So there's 4 different races in between the time that Michael hit and this other race. And not counting one of those is the World Championship, which all of the bigwigs and all of the admins are going to be focusing on that to make sure it runs smoothly.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a nightmare of how many races got deferred or changed, or the swim course was shortened or even canceled this year.
Right. Yeah. All things considered, I think Ironman did everything we could have expected of them and more. And I'm kind of disappointed with the triathlon community that feels like they didn't, because I don't see what they could have done better.
Right. So for first timers, what advice would you give them for this race?
Train smart. Let's see. Well, I'd say that for any Ironman race, but for this one specifically, again, the same thing. Even though it's a relatively flat course, train on some hills. It'll give you some confidence. And then to just mentally be ready for it.
What do you mean mentally be ready for it?
Just be ready for the fact that you're going to be moving for hours, and to not get ahead of yourself, to not dwell on things that have previously happened. If you had a bad swim, you have to shake it off, because you're going to be on the bike for a while. You're going to be running for a while. So just keep your head in the moment, keep relaxed, keep focused on the goal.
Okay. Well, Lisa, we covered quite a bit about your race. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I mean, I feel like I was very fortunate that I had such a good race on this day. I was very fortunate to finish when I did, and not half an hour later when it was downpouring. I know a lot of people were disappointed by the change in venue, even though everyone I think understands why. But then the change in course that came with the change in venue. And so again, that goes back to my make sure that you're training even in situations that you don't really expect to anticipate, because things might change. And even small hills on race day feel like huge mountains. And so if you're training on huge mountains, they won't feel like huge mountains on race day. Yeah, just be flexible and remember that we do this for fun and this is a hobby. And if you're not having fun, then maybe you need to examine some things.
Right. So I know you're doing St. George next year. What else is on your list for next year?
Finland, the 70.3 in Finland.
Wow.
So that'll be in June. So I have a May and a June, early May and a late June. And still trying to figure out what I'm going to do in late season, but it won't be another fall.
No?
No, I'll do another one someday. Just, it'll be a few years.
So why don't you like the full distance?
It's a lot more training, a lot more of a time sacrifice than even a 70.3.
Right. So as far as races that are on your bucket list, I know you've been in the sport for some time now. What races are on your bucket list?
Oh gosh. That's hard. I don't really have any specific races that I'm like, I absolutely must do this one. There's somebody on my tri team who has a lifetime goal of doing an Ironman on every continent that has an Ironman. I think that would be a fun thing to accomplish as well. But yeah, I can't think of any specific races that I think I absolutely must do this race. It's just, I do ones that seem fun at the time.
Okay. So I only have one more question for you, Lisa, and that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
A perfect race would be one that everything that you did leading up to it comes together and it clicks on that day. So everything that you did in training, everything that you did to practice your nutrition, every conversation with the coach, with teammates, with friends, that everything comes together and that on race day you had a plan and you executed the plan perfectly. Wow.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on, sharing some time with me about your race, and I look forward to following you at St. George in Finland next year. It's going to be awesome.
Thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.